Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Terrell, the chairman of the Orange County IDA. Today is Wednesday, December 1st, and it's approximately 5:42 p.m. If everyone please stand for the pledge. That way, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for joining us, for the people that can join us online. Couple quick notes. This is a committee meeting, so we'll be going over a lot of different things from finance to some procurements that we're looking to go through. This is an open meeting, so it's not just a meeting where the chairman and or the CEO, executive director talks. Everyone has the ability to ask questions, do whatever we want. We won't be voting on anything tonight, but we will be taking what we talk about tonight and bringing it to our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is for Wednesday, December 15th, right back in this room. With that said, couple points of order that we want to just go over. We did receive a letter today from Leslie Pieri, who is on our board. She has tendered her resignation. She didn't make that verbal in the past, but we did get the notice today, effective today. So that's, we want to thank Leslie for all of her work, and we hope for her to have a speedy recovery. Hopefully we'll be able to see her maybe after the 15th. The idea on the 15th, we have a regularly scheduled meeting. I asked Bill to poll the board to see if anybody would like to join the staff and any of the board members and any of our consultants to go have a quick little, like some appetizers or something right around the corner at a local restaurant. We could all just sit down and hang out and relax and that type of stuff. But whoever can attend, that would be great. And we'll get into more of that as we get closer to that date with the location and the exact time and whatnot. With that, I'll turn this over to Bill, and we'll go over some of the hot button items that he wants us to or present to us, and then we'll take it from there.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first item to discuss is more kind of timely news, was that the Orange County Legislature released their investigative report on the misdeeds or misdoings of the prior administration. So that was recently released, shared it with the board a couple of days ago, yesterday, whenever that was. So you understood the details. Wasn't terribly involved, on 18-page summary, and then there were some other appendices with it. I don't know if you want to have any discussion about that to start.
No, I think, you know, when it came down to it, I would ask everyone to read it, both on the staff side and consultant side and on the board member side. It has a couple different things in there that we should potentially look into. What I'd like to be able to do is to have everyone ingest that, and then we'll schedule it as a potential preview or something to potentially be decided upon what our next steps would be. So the idea there is the report comes out and talks about a recommendation for us to potentially pursue some more legal matters. I would like our new attorney Sue and Langdon, our attorneys from the county, to be able to talk about it and really give you, Bill, a briefing on a synopsis. And we're going to come together and potentially figure out, you know, what's worth what. Is there any meat left on that bone, per se? And how we would potentially go about that. If we wanted to, obviously, we'd come to the board and we would vote on whether we want to move forward with continuing to seek restitution from damages. We would also want to better understand the costs for doing so. So I think there's a little bit of work that needs to be done by staff and by council to identify that. Almost like a little, I hate to put it in a dollars and cents term, but a cost benefit analysis. What is it potentially that we can go after? What is it going to cost? And who would actually do the work? And then once we have a little bit more information, I think then we would have a discussion at the board level with a potential vote if we wanted to move forward with something like that. So I don't know if we have all the information today. I don't think so. We may not have it by the 15th either, but please read the report, and I would think that we would want to start putting together a small team to analyze that report, the report from the DA and the comptroller's office, and any of the specifics, hard number stuff that we could potentially look at to come up with a analysis so we could come up with a determination. So that's what I would ask as a takeaway. To have you work with counsel on that. Great.
Second item for discussion are the proposals we received for, I'll call it CFO duties, Chief Financial Officer duties. Of course, we haven't had a CFO position since May, June timeframe. We've been outsourcing bookkeeping responsibility for quite some time, long before that, frankly. And then with UHY Advisors based in Kingston, we, increased the responsibilities of UHY once the CFO left in order to kind of get us through the next 6 months. Of course, I prepared you at that time saying, let's do it for 6 months and we'll take another look. We'll get other proposals and such. We've done that. We have 4 proposals to compare. One is from BST, a CPA firm in the Capital District area. I will note that they have commonly been a CFO for hire by agencies like IDAs. There's a few IDAs that they currently work with. So that they were recommended to me in my trip to New York State EDC conference and by another contact. We also had the Orange County Finance Commissioner. And that was the arrangement that the IDA had under the prior commissioner for many years. So Karen Hablow is the current commissioner, and she has provided a proposal for that. We also have a local CPA, RBT, formerly known as Vanacorda Benedictus, DiGiovanni and Waddell, other RBT CPAs. They are based in Newburgh. And we also received a new proposed engagement letter from UHY for them to take on, to carry on, I would say, in the same arrangement. Now, having done it 6 months, they adjusted their pricing a little bit based on, I think, the work that they've seen regularly. So you have those proposals. I also provided this comparison spreadsheet. Best effort we could make to try and compare apples to apples. Not every proposal is exactly the same. Some included some specifics, some did not include some of the same. We did interview the last couple of days these applicants just to try and really make this form work, get all the answers we needed. So I think it's pretty clear in here. I'm happy to go through it item by item is what I plan line by line quickly, but to discuss the responsibilities, how it's currently being done now, and just very quickly what's been proposed. If that's acceptable, however you'd like to pursue.
Sure. So I'd like to open up to the board, but more importantly, great job. Great job of putting this together, because for me, sometimes looking at a chart is sometimes the easiest thing to look at, especially when you're comparing a procurement. Whether it's opening up a bid for a job, or a construction job, or getting some consultant services. And, I think you've identified duties well. We know, you have the current arrangements column. We have, we're trying to procure stuff on a open basis so that we can compare and get the best bang for our buck, but more or less get good quality as well. And I think we've done all of that. I think it's a testament to I don't know if we want to call it an official procurement policy, but it's a thing that we've been doing now for a while, and I think it's something that we can hang our hat on. And I very much like, and I started reading this. I read the charts. I read some of I didn't read it page by page, every single one of them, but I will. But it's something I think that we should all consider, look at, and potentially come to a conclusion on maybe voting as early as our next regularly scheduled meeting. The options here that we previously talked about are like the CFO duties. It's in lieu of actually hiring a CFO. Okay. In the past, they had a the previous board had a semi part-time or more than part-time. It was like a 30-hour type thing at significantly higher costs. But I didn't know. I think we all questioned whether or not there was enough duties there for them to warrant spending 30 hours. Unfortunately, though, we did have a conflict with that individual, or that individual had a conflict representing other entities, so we could not move forward or stay with that, and that's when we decided to do something like this. This was, while it's coming now, we obviously concentrated on getting a general counsel first, and then this was, I don't want to call it secondary, but this was 1A of this type of procurement. So I'm very impressed by the way staff has put this together. I think we can all ingest it and ask any questions that we may have. If you have any tonight, we can ask them a bill. If not, we can wait till Wednesday the 15th. But I think the idea here is that we're looking to get some assistance for staff to do some of these financials, whether it's the regular financials, whether it's any of these lists of duties, as well as working with additional consultant staff, whether it's general counsel, bond counsel, on all this type of reporting that are going to be coming due very quickly. So I think time is of the essence in getting an entity like these on board. Now, remember, we also have an audit company, or we also have procured in the past a CPA firm locally to do an audit. And they did not reply to this, correct?
They did not, because the audit is ongoing right now.
Is ongoing.
So they'll be doing that for the next few months. So,
yeah, so maybe they would be eligible in the future, but at this point, they would be separate than this group, which I think is a good thing. I mean, having more people look at things and not having the auditor do the actual work, I think is probably a good way to avoid a conflict or a potential conflict, even though it might be different people in the same firm.
and Mr. Chairman, if I could add,
Please do.
we talked about the audit and how it's kind of late getting started. So is that something else we would have liked to re-procure? So we're sticking with JGS this year. They've done it for several years in the past now. But they do understand. We had a lengthy conversation about the need, and they certainly had no qualms about it, about the need for us to re-procure that, really, if we're going to do virtually all services. So they're sticking with this. They did express, because there's a decent chance that we move away, that they did express the interest in when the time comes, if there's an opportunity for them to bid on this service as well, bookkeeping, accounting services. But right now, they will be our auditor for 2022.
Great.
Any questions now, or should we review any of this? I think we're good. Great, yeah. Okay.
Joey, I just want to add and say, so this is the first time you asked for this type of comparison, Mike. And the first time I would look through, but this specific one was very helpful to me, and I have to agree with you. Thank you.
Appreciate to see that. Okay, good. Good to know when we're on target there. So much credit to the staff.
I know it probably took a lot of time to put together, but it makes our lives a lot easier identifying who can do what and the duties and then what pricing at the end.
I needed to go through this exercise to really be able to sort them out apples to apples, because it's just, they're not equal, these proposals. So this allowed us to kind of put it all on paper and allow me to be able to analyze as well. So appreciate it.
Any comment from councils in regards to how we're procuring this, or I'd like to have you guys ingest some of this information as well, so that if there's anything that is abnormal or something that's alarming that you would advise us against or whatever. But I think it's pretty simple. It's a procurement of financial services, and some are companies, some are individuals, and I think moving forward, I think we'd be able to vote on this at our next meeting.
So I had an opportunity just briefly today to communicate with Bill, and I agree with you that your auditor should be different from your financial person, because it does keep it independent and it is a belts and suspenders type situation. So from a governance standpoint, I think that's appropriate, and I would encourage you to do that. With respect to the chart that Bill circulated, I didn't really have a chance to digest it, and he and I have on the books a day to sit together and kind of give me the lay of the land, and that's coming up. We haven't had that yet, so I don't feel equipped to comment on the chart yet, but I will review it prior to the board meeting. I'll let Bill know if I have any comments or questions. But I think the way you're approaching it is appropriate. And I think you need to look at all of the factors, what you need, what they're willing to provide, and the cost associated with that, and then go from there. I think you're right on track.
Great. Thank you, Sue. All right, so we'll ask everyone to take a look at these and come up with any list of questions that you may have. If you have any in the interim, obviously you can ask Bill in the interim, and then potentially we'll put this as an agenda item under what is procurement of consulting services come under? New business? Whatever makes the most sense to the agenda for the meeting.
Great.
Okay.
Very good. Next item on our list is 603 and 605 Broadway. You'll recall that we've been renting there for a few years. The two buildings on Broadway focused on fashion manufacturing for the Accelerator pod. We, as a result of, again, the wrongdoings and the results of the Office of State Comptroller's report, that really it was determined on there, I think I stated it before, page 28, stated that any contract that was entered into after the date that one of the board members became an employee of GTG, sometime in 2015, that actually, exact date is escaping me, any contracts that were entered into from that period forward are null and void. So taking that stance, we notified the landlords before holdings that we would no longer be paying rent. There were no CAM charges due for the next couple of months, common area maintenance charges, taxes, insurance, utilities, etc. We had not intended to pay those, and they know that. So when they got a tax bill, the Bloomer family, the former landlord, they did write us a letter, which is on the cover of your packet there, requesting, I think the way they put it, in the spirit of our relationship and the way that we, entered into this endeavor together, regardless of what's happened, looking to see if we can come up with what they can consider as some sort of concession where we continue to not pay rent. In our current arrangement, just to remind you, is that any sublease rent that we receive, so from our subtenants, the accelerator clients themselves, and not everyone is paying or paying on time, we're remitting any of those payments to the Bloomers, to B4 Holding, but we're not paying any rent ourselves. So again, they're asking that, given that's the situation, could we make it more palatable for them for the remainder of the original lease to pay the CAM charges? So we first brought this up last month, and you had requested more analysis, which is obviously due, and that's what you have there. So the letter is first. I'm not looking at the packet organized the way you have it. And then we have these two summaries, one for 603 and one for 605, and it gives you a sense of what, and Kelly put this analysis together, that you have from August 2020 to August 21, what have we paid. Some of these are annual, the taxes are annual, the water and sanitation are quarterly, the insurances are annual, there are monthly utilities, of course, all of that. But Kelly took the annual amount, whatever it might be, and then just simply divided it by 12 in order to give you kind of, again, apples to apples, seeing what everything is each month. And then the snapshots, the figures to the right are really kind of a snapshot of billings that we've paid. Some were the most recent Kelly had available to her, given the timing. And that's 603 the way I'm looking at it. And then 605 is similar. It's listing these different CAM charges, what it costs us a year, what it costs monthly. And I also have, I believe I sent you, I included one copy in your packet, which is really a copy of the bill that they sent us that they're looking for first opportunity for us to contribute to, including property taxes.
So a couple questions here, Bill, just for, you may know off the top of your head, just so we're working off the same sheet of music. These lease expiration dates are confirmed. These are when the leases that we have with the Bloomers for these two buildings are coming due, or these are proposed dates? October 1st, 23, July 18th, 23. That's one question. Second question, do we have subtenant leases with the tenants that are our tenants? Do we have agreements in place with those tenants?
We do.
That are not expired?
A couple are expired, so at least one is expired, I should say.
Okay.
There we go. 1 second. Just pulling this up now.
I'll take your time.
Newburgh. Talking about our leases.
Our leases with
the former leases that we consider void. For 603, that runs through October 1st of 2023.
Okay, that's what they have on the cover sheet.
And 605, July 15th, 23. Going to our subleases. Let's see. So we have Inner Beauty Effects. She left. She got a full-time job, so she's no longer with us. That is empty. Hers would have just expired. We do have an expired sublease with one of the tenants at 603 Broadway, Rondon Footwear. And then there are two leases for Shelley Scott, one that expired this year in June and one that runs through next year. And then we have Zeal in 605. They're the only tenant next door in 605 Broadway, and their agreement expires in October of 2023.
And just for the record, the use of the word expires, leases, all leases are void just by operation of law.
Thank you.
The reason why I asked for this type of stuff is the same type of analysis that we did in Middletown, where we identified the status of our lease with the landlord. We've identified the subleases that we have with our tenants, and then we went ahead and voted upon and moved forward with an analysis to have 100% cost recovery to those tenants and giving them the option to continue on or leave, or find another location, which we would help them with as well. We've gotten a couple back. We haven't heard from a couple, that's the status that is still being played out. That is one way that we did a previous location. In that instance, it was a little bit different, but somewhat the same, right? It's a little bit different, meaning it's a little bit different types of tenants. It's in a floor of a building, not really the entire, not the entire building. It was like an excess square footage of the medical hospital, former Portland Hill Hospital, those type of things. In this instance, this is two standalone buildings where the entire building is in a agreement with, or in a previous agreement with us. And then we have some of the building with subtenants in it and other parts that are empty, that are no tenants in it. What's alarming to me a little bit is the amount of the CAM. If I look at this correctly, we're talking about for 603 and close to $29,000 in just common area maintenance, and for everyone, that's not including rent. That's just to keep the building running, type of stuff. And then in 605, $53,000 in CAM. This is, some serious expenses that, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, are not recovered by the subtenants. So if you look at each one of these items, the subtenants that we have are not partaking in the expenses that the landlord is being charged for, who in turn is looking for us to pay for. So that's a big difference that I see. And some of these items are very basic in the cost of doing business, whether if it's insurance or utilities or garbage or snow removal, Helcom, and cleaning. I mean, these are, some very, very basic line items that for in excess of years, these subtenants have been not partaking in assisting with. I don't know if they have the ability to or not. I'm not going to profess to know that. But would you be able to tell us, Bill, how long these subtenants have been in these locations?
So
I think it's in that big master colored spreadsheet. I'm sure I have it in a file, but it's a lot easier for you to pull up on a computer.
sure. So interviewed effects was gone, but they were first there December 1st of 2020. Rondon Footwear, they first occupied the space February 1st of 2019. Shelley Scott occupied one space July 1st of 2019 and the other September of 20. And lastly, Zeal, again, the only tenant at 605 next door, began occupying the space in the middle of October of 2018.
Okay.
Agreement wasn't executed until November of 2019.
Okay. With this, I think we have some information. In this instance, we also, well, 603 and 605 are owned by the same development company, or the same family. We have one occupant in one and multiple occupants in another, correct?
Yes.
Yep. This brings up a point that we need to discuss and come up with. I don't believe there is a policy in place but one of the subtenants, and we don't need to identify them by name today, but I think we know, has been in arrears in excess of amount of time.
Yeah,
In excess of 90 days,
for sure.
maybe even long, probably.
It had been several months when I first was kind of inserted in this situation, and then we'd come to an agreement that they were going to start paying at least, worry about their arrears second, but start paying current. We got 1 month, and then they were unable to pay beyond that. So it's several months, close to a year of arrears.
Yeah.
They have been struggling.
Yeah. I was wondering, do we have any type of instrument that we can use to retrieve some of the money? I mean, some form of, could be something, pressure, some type of pressure on them to get money.
Those that are in arrears, or if we were to cover additional
yeah, even both. I mean, it could be, because as human beings, if we don't have pressure on them, they have trade-offs with whatever they do with their money.
So yeah, that's a good point, Vince. Our subleases that we have with our subtenants, what are they required? Does any of that language require them to help pay for some of this camp?
No, it doesn't. No.
So unfortunately, it doesn't feel that way, Vince, in regards to that. But rent is rent, and if we have a tenant that is not paying, just like anybody would have the ability, we have to be able to come to a solution. And a solution could be either they pay rent, they go on a payment plan, or unfortunately give them notice and they would have to leave. I think those are the three options. I mean, this is like any other transaction, whether if it's your mortgage, whether if it's you're renting an apartment, or whether you're renting a building. Those are the three options. And I think that while Bill has tried in his transition to get this, it feels like, to say this, but it feels like we're being taken advantage of.
I will tell you that I have calls almost every week with them checking in and finding what's happening, and it's difficult for them. They're emotional. I will say the ownership is emotional, because so I do think it's absolutely genuine that they're struggling. And they have a second line of business that they entered into last year, really given an opportunity given the pandemic, and it's in that second line of business that they actually have some orders. But the primary business that they entered, the accelerator, more fashion related, is not happening at all. It's actually, they've told me it's 95% shut down. Yeah. So my point is, I don't believe, all I can go on is my conversations, that they're willingly trying to take advantage, but I do understand what you mean.
The other aspect is, like we did with the New Windsor facilities that we rented that are coming due at the end of the year, we've given the subtenants the option to talk with the landlord, the owner, to directly rent from them. That's another option that we can entertain and go down, because as Bill and Lanya said, and many reports have now said, all of these agreements, I'll say, whether they're leases, subleases, whatever, are all void. While I think he did that with New Windsor on those ones that are coming due, I think there's an option here that's a different option. And the option is to let these subtenants directly talk to this landlord and come up with a term that they could come together with.
And we have encouraged that, actually. I have a number of conversations with the Bloomers about that, about how it's similar to the arrangement we have in New Windsor, and basically, letting them know it looks like by attrition we're going to be doing this, as these come due. And they have had dialogue with some. They've actually referred some of our current tenants then, even have some others that are interested in leaving Middletown, for example. One's based in Newburgh, her business is based in Newburgh, really, or she lives there and such, and introduce them to the Bloomers about finding something that would work there. So both sides are up for that, I think, but it's in that spirit, it's towards that end that the Bloomers are asking, well, we could make it work. They also don't want to double the rents for these tenants. Because I've shared with anyone I'm dealing with, New Windsor or whoever else, here's what they're paying. Here's what we're covering in, say, CAM charges, utilities that aren't being borne by the subtenants. So just so they know what they're in for. So we've tried to broker that.
Have you done that on both sides, Bill? Do the tenants know what the landlords are charging, and the landlords know what we're collecting?
Yes. Okay. I'm sharing that. So they understand the situation. Absolutely. So again, the Bloomers are trying to engage in those dialogues and everything. And it's again in that spirit that they've come to us saying, for us to make it work for the tenants and keep the rent at least close to what they've been receiving, we need some help on the CAM. That's their argument, what they're posing to us. But we've been down that road with dialogue, and that's what brought us to this point.
Did the, B4 Holdings, one of the, did they do work to them not knowing that these were to be, null and void? They didn't know on their side. Did they do work to these buildings to try to set them up to be accelerator specific?
The IDA.
I don't even honestly know, with all due respect to the family, who I hear nothing but good things about, what they knew or what they didn't know. They were supposed to make certain improvements to their buildings. Whether they did or not, I don't know. I'm not casting aspersions if they did.
But we did, right?
We did. My understanding,
we made improvements
we did actually. We paid.
We
paid for that.
That's kind of
The agreement.
of not, I mean, the former board.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Do we have a dollar amount of what that
I
was
believe what
about?
was pledged was that we would invest $300,000 over a couple phases to make these improvements, and the B4 Holdings would also invest at least $100,000, and they've done mostly in kind. They do own a construction company, and so they do this work, and that's basically what they said. Now we put in, my understanding is $200,000. There's still this last $100,000 that was expected.
Can you confirm that amount, or try to come up with the
Sure.
exact number on
Sure.
what we put in? That's a different way as well. I hate to say it, but I mean, that's another way. I'm saying to myself, listen, if leaving the program, they're local, and they say, okay, let's get something going here, and they've expect. But if the IDA made the improvements to get to, so again, as you're getting through the different layers, I guess, to try to understand it, but
My respectful suggestion is they made their pitch to you. I suspect Susan will want to share her thoughts with you in an attorney-client session, very much on this. And I think they made their pitch and you received it, and you can talk about it later at the regular board meeting if you're ever inclined to take action on it.
yeah, so I would just ask that if you could put together just a quick little listing of the subtenants, whether they're under lease or if it's expired.
Okay.
Some of the stuff you just talked about.
Yep.
With some of the dates, just so we have that all. What they're paying, almost like a little subset of your master spreadsheet.
Yep.
And then if you can come up with and find that exact amount that the previous
invested
board
in
invested already into those facilities, we would have a better understanding of what we put in as the IDA, what we're obtaining from rent, and the benefits that these individuals are getting. We have the CAM broken down, I think, to the best of your ability. I mean, so.
I can do that, easy enough.
And, yeah, I think we have a lot of the information. Just a little bit more, I think we'll be able to make a determination.
Great. Any other questions or comments or additional information I can compile for that? No.
Sue, any questions, concerns on that one?
To be honest with you, I don't have enough background information to know if I have questions, but I have made notes to myself to talk to Bill about, and we will do that.
Paul, any questions, concerns? I'm sorry I keep on looking this way, but I forgot that you're on, online with us.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I don't have any questions at this point, so I'm good.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that as well. Sure. And what's the next one?
Next item is one of our, well, they were an applicant for a 2022 agent of the IDA, which of course with the budget you passed is really just a line item now with a number in there, and rather than being specific for each applicant, it's just a total dollar amount that you can decide. At least that's what we projected. So you, on a case-by-case basis, accepting that. We also so this is one of our 2022 applicant, agent of the IDA applicants, but they also submitted a waiver. They had an agreement with the IDA, and I shared the agreement. It's simply a letter from the OCIDA to this agency saying you're approved for $30,000 for 2021, in return for the services that they, on their application, stated they would be providing. And we got, for the first time this year, we got a voucher from them, an invoice requesting to be paid, and they've completed their side of the agreement. So you had asked in the last board meeting if I could put a checklist together that we would use for future consideration of agents of the IDA. It's a very rudimentary example of that, just including the information that you had specifically requested, and we have a lot of the backup behind there. We have their voucher, their letter, a cover letter, and the actual voucher they submitted, and you have a copy of their 2022 agent application. Again, did have an agreement for $30,000. They did seem to and they provided a lot of backup that I did not share with you. Attendance records for people that attended their workshops and one-on-one counseling sessions. I have all that backup, but it's a lot of paperwork, so I didn't include that. But just going through this checklist quickly, there's the name of the agency, in this case, Women's Enterprise Development Center, WEDC. I did include, really couldn't find a mission statement for them, but you see what I have in that field is really the best that we could come up with, which certainly does give you a good sense of what their work is and what populations they target and who they work with, the levels, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have this kind of standard that will be on this form all the time, mission of the IDA, so that you're able to see whether or not they're parallel or congruent. You also asked a couple of the questions, and again, I'll continue to update this form if there are other questions that you'll want answers to. Are they a regional agency or Orange County based? In this case, they are regionally focused on the Mid-Hudson, basically from Westchester up to our area in Orange and Dutchess. Are they receiving funding from other IDAs? Again, they've requested $30,000 or had an agreement for $30,000 with Orange County IDA. They do receive $15,000 a year from Dutchess County. It used to be from the IDA, but I think for compliance standpoint, it was recommended to them that it should be from the LDC, so that's what they're paid out of the LDC, like we would do in these cases. What else are they receiving from other counties? They receive $170,000 a year from Westchester County. That used to be the Westchester IDA. It was moved to the county. $80,000 a year from New York State for their EAC programs, and $150,000 a year from SBA. What's the purpose of the funding? What they had pledged to were two, this is the ETP that I referenced earlier, Path to Entrepreneurship training programs, 1 hour, 60-hour ETP, more intense, minority and women-owned business enterprise boot camp, helping to help small businesses learn how they can become certified as an NWBE. And they do provide a lot of individual one-on-one counseling with one of their staff members and staff from the companies that they're working with. Again, behind that is the letter and the front page of the voucher and their 2022 application. Actually, this is their 21 application, which is what we're considering payment on.
A couple questions that I would have. Can you provide to us how much money the Orange County IDA has given them in the past? Try to find that out.
Yeah.
You know, with some history.
Just really quickly on their application for this year, it states $25,000 in 2016, $25,000 in 2017.
Can you go slower?
Sure. $25,000 in both 2016 and 2017. $30,000 in 2018, 2019, and 2020. And again, they were approved and they received those funds. And they were approved for $30,000 by the former administration for 2021.
Secondly, do you know if any of these workshops were conducted inside of Orange County? Held inside of Orange County? Can you figure that out?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'll verify that.
And how many, if they did do some counseling one-on-ones, how many of them were for Orange County residents?
Sure.
I think it's pretty basic to ask if any of this money is going internal or are all these workshops someplace else?
Sure.
But my question wasn't, again, for me, I mean, obviously the services and whatever, already for the year, but I mean, how do they solicit or how does the information get out to the people were taking these.
I can only tell you roughly, I can get you more information on
Yeah,
that, but
okay.
they do a lot of, digital marketing, they do email blasts, they use, partner agencies like the IDA, like SCORE, some similar kinds of agencies, similar missions, a lot of social media. They do have a pretty extensive, database now where they have businesses, potential businesses, and again, other organizations that are tied to those types of entities that they're promoting through. I can find a little bit more about their promotion now.
And membership, are we involved? I mean, do we have members from Orange County as members of the Women's Enterprise Development Center? Do we have people from this county involved, or it's just membership is maybe around Westchester and Dorchester? Whether we do have representatives from this county.
Yeah, I'm not sure if how you consider, if you consider it membership or what, but, clients, individuals and companies that are getting assistance. I do see here from their application that since January of 21, they provided 63 hours of one-on-one business certification counseling in Orange County, and a total of 48 and a half in 2020. Also this year, they provided 2 path entrepreneurship workshops. They launched a 60-hour, that's a Spanish-speaking class, actually, the 60-hour ETB course, and they completed 3 workshops of various topics.
Okay, that's just fine.
And additional workshops scheduled through December, so they do have others coming. They do.
A weird question. I'll ask this tongue in cheek, but is there a way to make sure that they don't have a conflict with anything that would, is there a form that they would fill out to make sure that they're not in conflict with anything, either individuals here or with anything? I don't know how to actually word that. I don't know, but if we're going to use somebody, whether it's a consultant or a service, we want to make sure that they don't have a conflict. I don't know if we have that. I don't know if we have that, if they fill out a form or if they attest that they don't, or that, I don't think any of us do. I don't know that for sure, but I don't think so. I know I don't. I don't really know this organization.
So we should have put it down when we filled our forms out.
Yeah,
But I agree with you.
but for them, are they filling out any?
Right, there should be something
That says that to us, just to make sure.
But at this point, if all of this has been complete again, and I think they did it in service, which they thought they were going to receive the money for, et cetera. How do we, at this point, I think we should know, what, where it went in these questions that we're asking, but at this point, can we, I don't know, call them no, that's really done.
I don't know. It's something that we're going to vote upon at our next meeting. But it's 90 and 50. It's $140,000 in the last 5 years. That's pretty significant. I don't know if what they've done. I just don't know. Sure, has been.
And they have been more than willing to appear when they first submitted their application.
Sure.
Discussion since, and certainly for this. So if on the 15th you'd like them to be available to answer any of the questions, they're more than willing to do that.
Yeah.
Sure call.
But if you can just find out if any of those things happened in our
Definitely
county and let us know that, and I think we'll put this as an agenda item on our agenda for 15th. Any other questions from board members on this one? Can you provide? Was there any correspondence from the previous board to them or from the IDA to them about? I don't know if it was an agreement, a contract.
The last correspondence coming from Orange County IDA was a letter in earlier this year, at the end of 2020, I should say, after they applied for funding for 2021. There was a letter. I don't know if it's in this file. I think I distributed.
If you could provide that to us for next month, so that we can see that if there was an actual something that, so we can be basing it off of the same thing.
No signed contract, just a letter signed by, I think, the former COO stating you were approved for $30,000 for 2021 funds. I'll share that with you again.
And if there was it voted upon by the then board? or was it just something that the COO or whomever just decided to approve? That's another question. No matter what, we're going to vote on. It's going to, anything that any expenditure, we're going to take a look at anyway, whatever was done in the past. But just for internal history, we'd like to be able to know that.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask you a question?
Please do.
So, and I apologize because again, haven't had a chance to get my feet wet, but when you say, Bill, that they submitted an application for this work, is that a program that is put in place where vendors can come to you for different things that further your mission? I'm trying to understand how it came before the prior board and how it got approved, because I had the same question that the chairman asked, like, is there a memorandum of understanding or is there a contract, or what were the terms of the agreement for getting this money? And maybe it's in the program documents. Maybe it's, look, we have this program, we have this fund. If you can satisfy this, here's fill out your application. And if it gets approved, that's it. But I'm just wondering if anyone has a sense of how it came about.
I don't know about the genesis of it. I have not seen anything written that really kind of talks to almost philosophically why the IDA does it. But my understanding is that, as you said, kind of like seen as extensions of IDA work. Of course, these folks focus on women, people that are working in lower economic strata, essentially. So that's their mission. I think the IDA thought as a way to indirectly impact those groups and help businesses, especially small businesses, especially those from either disadvantaged circumstances or minority or women-owned. So I think that's the concept. Here's a way we can do that. As far as the application, we send out, from what I saw from the process, we send out a blank version of this application. It's standard for across all the agents or would-be agents that we received applications from. They receive the same blank copy of it. It's quite simple. That's submitted, and all they get in return once approved, I will see exactly if there's resolutions with the board. If they discuss it, we'll get those specifics. And then they just send a letter back on letterhead saying you've been approved for this, for the very basic summary of the dollar amount of funding, and a simple kind of bulleted for these activities, you're funded in this amount. Pretty simple. Again, that letter's not here. You have not seen that letter yet, too.
And one is, a separate question. Is this an allowable expense that's allowed by the state through an IDA, or does it have to go through like a funding corporation? That's another question that I would have, because if you notice, they're getting funding, but none of them are from IDAs. They're either from county governments or from LDCs. So maybe they know something that we don't, or that they changed over time, and it might be something that might not be something that we can do. I don't want to say that until everyone has a chance to look at it. And we'll look at it again on, potentially look at it on December 15th, but if we don't have those answers, we may have to wait until we did.
Sure.
And that would be on any of these, on any of these types of things. I just don't want to, just because it was done in the past through the IDA doesn't mean that it should be. Sure. If they have to go through our funding corporation, or, let's take this time to make sure that what we're going to do or what we potentially do, we do correct.
Sure. And any information on other funding sources and how they may have gone from IDA and moved it over to the county, that all comes from the applicant. I have not reached out to these other sister organizations, but I could find out that the reason why they were changed is to give our council a little lead on that.
If you have time to do that, that would be great, especially like with Duchess and Melissa.
Correct. I have some other things to talk to them about, so I can definitely do that.
Cool. All right.
Great. I only have a couple of just discussion topics, no other handouts for you, I'm sorry.
Okay.
One, and this too, I understand if Sue isn't prepared to respond to this, because again, she has not even had a chance to get her feet wet. We were going to have kind of an introductory call and go over a lot, and she offered to come down in person, so that would be much more helpful. So she's going to be doing that shortly, actually before the next board meeting. But I did ask upon your request about whether or not I should be a signatory. Any concerns there? So I don't know if you're prepared to respond to that. Understood. Again, if not, but I just want to relay that I have passed that question on to you for consideration.
So as with everything, it's not that you can't be a signatory, but we need to have belts and suspenders. So we don't want the same person being the person who is approving expenses or awarding vendors contracts and writing checks. So sometimes what you see is your finance person, who I know you're looking to retain, is going to be the check signer, and Bill's going to be the person who approves things, writes out the requisition, submits it to your finance person. So you have a checks and balances, or you have the chairman be the signatory, or you have dual signatories. So you don't run into a situation where you have one person controlling the awards, the spending, and the check cashing. But again, because I haven't had the opportunity to sit with Bill and truly understand your internal structures and your framework, I'm not comfortable saying he should be or he shouldn't be. I think it is something that when we look at the totality of how the IDA is set up, what you have in place currently, what you're proposing to put in place, we can easily determine at that point who should and who shouldn't be. If this is a short-term issue, I don't think there's a lot of harm in short-term, but I think that we need to understand globally what are the safeguards we're going to put in place to make sure that you are going to be above reproach, and that you're not going to have a situation that easily, and please, I'm not assuming Bill would ever do this, but anyone could easily take advantage of the IDA. So that's my response. I'm sorry that it's not perfect.
No. I mean, one of the things that we initially did was we pledged to be fully transparent on everything that we do, right? So hence, even our committee meetings are publicized, our regular meetings, all that stuff. But more importantly, we also pledged that all of our expenses are going to come to the board, and the board is going to vote on them. I mean, that makes for a long board meeting sometimes, but all the stuff that's coming is coming to the board for full disclosure, full approval in a public setting. The issuance that we have right now is that myself and Leslie, who just recently resigned, as dual signatory on any checks that are written. That has to obviously change now that Leslie has resigned, and we have to come up with a solution to that. The idea, and I would float this potentially for a reorganization meeting in January. I'll use the term reorganization lightly, but because while we're going to have 2 members cycle off and potentially new members come on, I would think that we would do a reorganization meeting like we did our first meeting, like in March, where we would come to terms with what types of members we are, and more importantly, potentially vote for leadership and the different positions that we would have in regards to the board. I think we've taken a stance where it's less about assigning people to committees. We're going to have committee meetings as we need them, where all board members can come, and then anything that's going to come out of committee is going to go to the full board for approval and/or review and vote on at the regularly scheduled meeting. So, but I'm thinking that because of the turnover, we may need to do that. I don't know what that means in regards to signatories, because we just lost one, and right now we don't have the ability. So it's something that we have to consider. And as we consider these CFO duties, they're going to be more on the consulting side. So I don't know if we would feel comfortable with having someone that we may change periodically to be a signatory on a check from a public benefit corporation. I would rather have that see as being board members and/or staff, or both.
So what I'm hearing, which I think is positive, is that when an expenditure is going to happen, it is presented to the board, and maybe there's a spreadsheet of them, maybe there's just one, maybe there's 5, who knows? But it is a physical document that's presented and voted on in a public meeting. So if that's the case, then I think that Bill could be a signatory, and he could provide that spreadsheet to whoever's doing your accounting work. Because if it's an outside firm, who cares? It's a public meeting. These are the expenditures that were approved. Cut me the checks, I'm going to sign. You could also put into place, checks above a certain amount require 2 signatures, because, that's just checks and balances again. And that way, because Bill his full-time job is running the IDA, and you all have other jobs, it allows you know, work to go on without having to figure out, oh, when am I going to be able to get someone to sign this check? Where do I have to run it? You know, and so if you put in a cap, like anything under X number of dollars, as long as it was approved at a public meeting, Bill can sign the check. If the check is above a certain threshold, that's going to require dual signatures. I mean, there's lots of things that you can do to safeguard against, you know.
Card. We also have a corporate credit card that can be used up to a certain amount. So that's also, so it kind of, it feels like a little policy or a little cheat sheet policy needs to be written so that we follow.
Right,
So,
exactly.
yeah, take a look at the solution and we'll vote on that as early as next meeting. You know, but right now it's dual signatures and I feel comfortable with that. I don't mind having to sign, whether it's a secretary of the board, whether it's the CEO. We didn't have an executive director CEO at the time. We didn't have that choice. We had an administrative assistant, Kelly, and we didn't want to put too much more burden on her. She was doing everything. Yeah, so let's come up and let's brainstorm that and then come up with a solution, maybe even vote on it at our next meeting. And I don't know if that would go in bylaws or not, but if it was, then I'd ask for council to write it up and put it into the bylaws as a bylaw change.
While we're on this subject, and before you state whether or not Leslie's resignation is effective immediately or tomorrow, any thoughts on how we can get a second signature on some of these checks that are, including our CD deposit?
Yeah, no, Leslie has resigned. So we're gonna have to potentially do a stopgap measure at our next meeting to assign her secretary duties to another board member, I would think, with council's approval. And then in the interim, until we come up with this policy, or maybe we just do the policy right away. And whatever that solution is, whether we assign another board member as secretary and make them a signatory and do that, or if we come up with a policy where, whether if it's a board member and the president, CEO, or I don't know what your title is, though.
I'm CEO.
Okay, CEO.
So could that, quick question, could that be done now at the finance committee meeting?
I don't think we can vote on anything in the committee meeting.
You can't vote in that.
No, not with a forum.
Because that's a great point, Mike. If it's an emergency and we have bills that need to go out, just a quick question, could something be done in this kind of setting right now? I don't know.
Even if it's temporary, so
I don't think you have the authority as a committee to make that change. I think you could call an emergency board meeting, and you could have probably done it earlier today to make this an emergency board meeting. So the board could vote on it. But one thing I would highly recommend, and again, this is one thing where Bill sent me the bylaws today, but I would highly recommend that you do not embed your policies into your bylaws, because your bylaws should be relatively high level, generic information about the composition of the board, the role of the officers, you know, et cetera. If you embed every policy into your bylaws, then every single time you want to change a policy, it's a bylaw change. And that's a much bigger deal. We should create, if you don't have them, go through the ABO's checklist of the required policies under the general municipal law and the PAAA and draft policies. And if you want to have a check cashing policy, which I think you should, draft that. We'll post them on your website. But my recommendation is don't embed them in your bylaws. And I haven't looked at all the bylaws, but Bill, maybe you know, I mean, is there an emergency provision in your bylaws for officers to act in the absence of, like, if the secretary is absent, you know? And if you have no check cashing policy right now, like how did you decide which two people were signing checks?
There was a chairman and the secretary. I don't know how, it was.
I think I remember Leslie may have gotten volunteered for that.
Yeah, she got voluntold, and being the chairman, I guess I just assumed that it was me.
Yeah.
Well, you should voluntold some, I mean, is there, like, so for me, I'm wondering what legality, like what requires you to have two signatures? Does anyone know?
I think at the time, if I remember correctly, it was the officers that we had voted on at that time wanted to have a high level of check and balance given the environment we were under. Yep. And it was signatures
Board members only.
2 signatures of board members only, in kind of a firestorm. And that's what I recall about. And I, as the vice chairman, was, didn't want to be the chairman. The vice chairman was chairman and secretary. So I think that's what I remember of that time.
So if anyone could track down that resolution or any evidence of that, maybe you get lucky enough where it says 2 officers or 2 board members. And then you don't have, you have the authority in between now and December. I don't know what pressing checks you have, but tracking it back to where the requirement came will tell us how to address it going forward.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, it's pressing, but it's pressing to a point. I mean, we have $500,000 that we previously voted on to invest into CDs, and we want to be able to get them in as soon as possible. Those type of things. But not like it's a bill that's due that we're going to get penalized for. It's something that we want to do.
Well, I mean, I will offer this to you too. Like literally, because this resignation came in, you just got formal notification of it. If you wanted to call a special board meeting for tomorrow afternoon and publish it, and you guys meet for the sole purpose of authorizing a different signatory, do it. It's one item. It takes 5 minutes. You're done. I mean, that is appropriate, but I leave that to you. I don't know. And again, maybe Bill gets lucky enough where he goes back and he finds a resolution and it just says officers. And then you've resolved the problem that way.
Okay. To be determined, but
Research that.
yeah.
Do you have any pressing bills that can't wait 2 weeks?
No, we just have the money we want to invest.
That's the most pressing thing in my mind.
That's the most pressing thing, and if it waits 2 weeks, I mean, we have the potential that the rates may change, but that's not necessary, that doesn't mean it's going to.
Catch a panel today. We'll lose a penny.
Yeah, we'll use the penny instead of.
We'll lose the penny.
Yeah.
We'll lose the penny over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But the rates ceasing.
But yeah, if not, I mean, I can see it being part of our agenda on the 15th. We'll amend that based upon what everybody agrees upon.
I'll check on that. Anything else on this subject?
I was just wondering, if a non-profit applies for funds, we give them exactly what they want, or we can negotiate and say, no, give you something lower.
That's a good question. You mean for like one of these agents?
Yeah, like this
Yeah.
woman.
Yeah, I would think that we would be able to do whatever we want. I mean, we're going to,
But I'm looking at the, what I have here, I don't know the justification for boot camps. I don't know, boot camps, 7,175 for boot camps.
Yeah.
Are they ever, can someone explain to me what boot camps, what's done? in boot camps?
I thought he's back on the room.
yeah.
Let's see.
So I've been on I'm listening. I apologize, I'm on the website. And I just like looking stuff up. That's the website, but I don't know what I haven't seen that yet. There's only 2 classes scheduled for December.
Yeah, so Vince, to answer your question, it should be determined, right? We can do or not do whatever the board decides that we want to do. The biggest thing is we have to make sure that council is okay, that this can go through the IDA and not through the funding corporation. We don't want to do something that the IDA is not allowed to do. So we want to make sure that is reviewed first before we consider this application or any others. All right, and just because they ask for something doesn't mean that they should get we can, and a perfect case would be, we may not be able to, in certain years, we might not be able to afford it. We may have funds allocated elsewhere. It's all depending upon, so no matter what, it'll come in front of the board and we'll vote upon it and discuss it amongst ourselves before we do anything. All right? Cool. All right, Phil, anything
The
else?
only other subject I have, and I don't have a detailed analysis for you, but it's just going back to personnel. Kelly and I would both like to get a little admin help. It is in the approved budget for 2022, up to 30 hours a week for an admin assistant. We do have someone, I think I mentioned last month, that we have someone that was going to do our minutes for our meetings, for committee meetings like this, and our board meetings. It didn't work out. So I actually brought someone back that had worked for the IDA. I worked with them a little bit. Years past, I verified their background and their connection, how they came to us. They came to us through the staffing service that we use. So she has actually been doing our minutes. And I just posed last month if she could do any extra work. So, and I understood the question of whether or not Kelly and I are too busy to do this ourselves. And we both feel that we could use the help. It's not like, our feet aren't up. We're definitely busy. I know there probably is the thought that we don't have applications. We don't have a current kind of application there. So what are we busy with? Well, I will tell you, we have 74 active projects, meaning that had already received benefits that we're always getting questions on, reports we have to do, additional legal work that's come up, IBM, et cetera, you recall. So there's a lot happening with that. Terrace reporting we've submitted. There are a lot of follow-up questions that came from the state comptroller's office. So there's plenty of things we're doing. Plus the other fact is Kelly's on vacation all next week and the following Monday. So this person will be coming in to do our minutes, and I'm wondering if at least I could use her for a few hours to help me prepare for the next board meeting. And then I'm hoping that in January, since it's part of the approved budget, it's not an issue. So I just want to cover that, get a little clarity from you, and see what I could do in the meantime, and if I'm good to utilize this person or someone else in the new year.
So it's a tough question for me because in a perfect sense, if the board decides that we're going to have another employee, whether it's part-time, full-time, whatever, and the scope of work, we would want that to be publicized, interviews to be, and other, have everyone have it open to the public to apply. And she may be the best option, but I don't know if we can just, for lack of the wrong term, sole source this just to the person that you have comfort with. She may meet all the demands.
Right.
She might be the best person, but we don't know that. You may know that. So I think what we need is we need a write-up. We need a write-up from you talking about what this type of, you're looking to add it, that you would like to add a position. You'd like us to vote on adding a position, whether it's how many hours, job duties, and what is the maximum amount, whether if it's annualized or whatever, with benefits, without, with, all that good stuff. Sure. So that we can ingest that and say, okay, yes, no, maybe so. And then once we allow that, or if we do allow that, then we would give you the right to go and procure that. And by procuring that, you would job post it, you would interview, you would background check, all those, whatever things need to be done. Make sure that they have their ADO training, all that good stuff. Or, make an offer, get an acceptance, get a start date. Now that doesn't handle what you need immediately. Right?
True.
So in this instance, I think you've already utilized this person as a consultant, as a contractor.
Essentially.
Yeah. So in this instance, I don't have an issue with you using a person as a contractor that's already been used as a contractor, just to get through some short-term stuff, to get some stuff done. I don't have an issue with that at all. I mean, that's, it lends down to, I think we need a policy that allows the CEO to expend certain amounts without coming in front of the board, even though everything's supposed to come in front of the board, type of thing. So I'm sure this is not a big dollar amount. I'm sure this would help you. I don't have an issue with it. It's not that we don't vote on at the committee meetings. Right. So in 2 weeks we can vote on this, but it's something that I think you need to present to us. I think it needs to be like a sheet saying this is what I'm looking to do, and then we would say yes, no, maybe so. If we say yes, then you would procure it.
Basically, you're on your own.
Right.
You're on your own. You're on your own for now. But so for me, I just talking about it, like obviously what you had said makes a lot of sense. But if there would be a need in between, maybe hire somebody full time at some point, and hopefully we do, we get going. But maybe there's an agency that you procure for temporary service. So if you needed somebody temporarily, then that agency has what we're looking for at whatever, and it's 2 weeks, a month, whatever. If you run into a project or something, and then we're okay with, once again, policy added up. Listen, I'd like to add that person for a 2-week period and then to report back to the board.
Yeah.
That's another.
Yeah, that's totally different. Yeah. Any other questions, concerns, or ideas about this one?
Great. Yeah.
And who let Kelly have time
I
off?
know, good question. I know, really. I don't know how she snuck that by me, but
They both deserve it, I'm sure.
Prime time, everything.
I know. That's all that you have?
That's all I have.
So on the 15th, how are we looking about, I think I sent an email out, last time 5 o'clock was a little tough for everybody to get, 5:30 better for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, the only, can make it, but my only issue is that I wasn't ready for the construction, which I should have done if my dad was there, but anyway.
Yeah,
So-
Route
so
207 is still under construction. I don't know what they're doing there, but we haven't.
I said, wait a minute, it hasn't been finished yet,
I know.
and I didn't have.
I don't know what they're doing.
My
Quality,
GPS set up.
Even if you have a take?
I don't cover all insurance, I don't know, I know they're putting the culvert, that's, I don't know the details of the project, but.
Okay. So on the 15th, I think 5:30, I've asked, I think you'll just renotice that. So I think we renotice.
Definitely.
As a quick thing, afterwards, anybody like to get together, I've asked Bill to maybe send that out and see anybody who would like to get together afterwards for whether it's drinks or cocktails or appetizers, and I would go like an establishment that's literally a couple blocks away. And I asked Bill to invite Kelly, at no expense to her, but we would all pick up her expense. If she would like to come, as well as any of our consultants would like to come, but everybody will be paying on their own.
I unfortunately have a conflict on the team. With for work, and another function for work. I would love to attend or whatever, I would gladly, I mean, I don't want to treat you guys for voting, and that's the only thing with voting, so I don't know how that would work.
So you don't think you'll be able to attend on the 15th? Not virtually either?
Well, I mean,
So let's make sure we have the 4 remaining. Yeah.
Right.
You hear that, Paul? He's not gonna be available, so
but I will,
we need everyone here.
Yeah, thanks. And then, on the 15th, we'd like to see an update from Warwick.
Yeah.
As you know, we have the $2 million, that is owed back to the IDA. Warwick LDC has received that money from the state. It's been a couple months now. It's past due, I would say. Please have some correspondence with them. If we don't get it by the 15th, I will ask that we have it as an agenda item to vote to have legal recourse.
Understood. And
I don't want to get to that, but it's not that the money's not there.
no, for sure. We've had some dialogue.
Yeah.
with them.
And I know it's coming, but it just feels like it's not.
It is
Yeah.
a long time.
And it's not $10, it's $2 million, and it's something that, it's a big difference for us. It's,
Money we could be investing too right now.
Exactly.
Not today, but
Exactly.
just a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And if I could just mention, I told you last time I was scheduled to have a meeting with the town supervisor to talk about the Warwick Accelerator and talk
Yeah.
about this issue and stuff. It was scheduled for today. He had to postpone. We are getting together tomorrow,
Cool.
so on time for the 15th.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect. A quick update on the 15th there'll be 15 days left in the calendar year. So what's happening with the tenants that need to make a decision at the New Windsor Accelerate, at the New Windsor locations that are coming due? That needs to, they need to either know that it's coming due, and they know that, so it's that type of stuff.
And I did, if I could just mention that, and just a quick update, I did reach out to the New Windsor town supervisor at the beginning of this week, because he was frankly just kind of reconfirmed as the supervisor.
Yeah.
So I kind of held off. It would have changed, it was a change in leadership, obviously, to change things. So he wrote me back this morning, I think, and said he'll have a little more information in the next couple of days. He'll leave me a call on my cell phone, so I hope to have some information, certainly more information by the 15th.
Then we'd also look for an update on the Middletown tenants that we offered the new leases to, like we do every month.
Yes.
An update on the loan fund, the repayments back in that, because that's supposed to sunset sometime next year.
Yep.
Right? Those types of things. Anything anybody else wants to have as an agenda item or thinking about that we need to discuss? Well, to end of the year financials, but that's not gonna get done until January, type of stuff. I don't think anything else. Offline, I'd like to have a conversation about personnel. I don't know when the last time they've received evaluations or anything like that, but it's something that we should be doing. We only have you and and Kelly, but, I think as a board, we should do an evaluation of the couple of weeks that Bill's worked and yeah, and the last year that Kelly has.
It's been good 48 hours.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work.
So I think we would do that, as a, just as
That's a good practice.
That's a good practice, put it in writing, tell them how good they're doing, those types of things.
I don't have any other items.
Procurement of bond counsel, right?
We also received a couple other
Yep.
proposals
So-
for local labor auditing too.
So in that instance, while you did a great job in you did such a great job in the CFO stuff, we'd ask for the same type of analysis to be done for bond counsel. But the idea here is that I think we're getting a lot of response for bond counsel. And from what I've been CC'd upon. We may need to shortlist it, meaning take the bigger list and come up with maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of the best candidates. But I would like to discuss with counsel, our counsel, general counsel, those job responsibilities that we were looking for bond counsel for. Just because what we've done in the past doesn't mean what we're going to do in the future, right? So as a board, we're going to decide what we want our general counsel to do and the capabilities that our general counsel has compared, because in the past, the general counsel didn't have the same capabilities that I think we have under general counsel today. So what I mean by that is, the very basic like resolutions and leases and those type of things. We want to have a discussion with our general counsel to understand what their capabilities are, so we're not duplicating. And that bond counsel is specific. It could even be as specific as we only use them just for bond counsel type bond financing projects.
Which is commonplace.
But let's come up with a parameter so that we know when we come and potentially interview and award bond counsel, we know what they're looking for, and more importantly, we can adjust numbers and budgets to identify who's going to be asked to do what. And it's kind of like a work in progress. I hate to say that as general counsel, but it's kind of like a work in progress. We need to understand what Sue and her company can fully do, what the county's going to be doing, what we can do, what bond counsel is going to do. I think we've had some great relationships with our existing bond counsel, and they've done a great job. But with that said, we got to come up with a solution. And I think we just need a little bit more. So we could put together that list and start working with general counsel to identify items that we are already under contract for, and that we want to use general counsel for, and stuff that they want us to potentially use bond counsel for. So we're under the same procurement type stuff.
Understood.
Yeah.
We also have received a number of responses for local labor auditing.
That was my next one. So local, it's the same thing. Let's just put together a little chart. Doesn't need to be grandiose as the finance one, but locally it's pretty simple. It's, you're gonna do it, and let's compare, and we have to make a decision about that. I think we do bond counsel first and then local labor second. We don't, but we have to procure this because bond counsel and local labor has not been procured for in excess of 5+ years. So it's more than enough time to go out. So I think we got some more of those coming in. Let's put them together and let's have a discussion on those as well.
Great.
I think those are our 2 remaining big procurements that we have, bond counsel and labor consulting. What else? I think that's it. Any questions? Anything you guys want to? Okay.
It's great. Man.
At this point, we don't have an application coming in front of us on the 15th.
I am expecting at least one, but I've had that a couple of times and they haven't come. So I've had a lot of dialogue. I've had discussions with a number of potential applicants, a couple of them a few times. So I am expecting one, but we'll see what happens. I will know more in the next week, obviously, but it's possible.
Sure. Okay. With that, the last thing that I would like is us to think about, we'll decide on the 15th when our next committee meeting is going to be. But one of those agenda items for that committee meeting is I'd like to have a comparison of IDA fees. We should look at that every year. I'd like to have it compared against other IDAs, whether they're local to Orange County or to the Hudson Valley region, so that we make sure that we're not, for lack of a better term, pricing ourselves out of projects. I don't know. I don't want to say that that's happening today, but we've been on since March and no applications is somewhat questionable. It is, especially in a market like this. So, well, not for the 15th, for sometime thereafter, probably after the holiday, we'll have a committee meeting and we'll go over a chart so we can identify that. And we may want to make some recommendations and potentially change our fee structure accordingly. I know looking at it, it's a little confusing to me. And I've looked at it for years and it's been confusing for years.
What was the process? You get an application, say, for next, hopefully, right, for a sec. So the application is up for review. What would the process be from there?
Typically the way, pardon me, the observations from me watching this IDA function for the last 7 years, they would, the application would be presented by the applicant in person or now, via Zoom. They've talked about their project. They would talk about why they need incentives. And the board would vote on an initial resolution to kind of accept the application and formally say that they are considering benefits. My understanding that's not done by all the IDAs I'm seeing and learning. We do that, then they schedule a public hearing, which you have to have a proper notice, I believe 10 business days. They could do that as soon as possible, given the amount of notice time you have. And then after that's done, successful public hearing, they can come right back to the board the very next board meeting for a final resolution to approve those incentives. That's how I've
But it would have to be fully approved locally through, the project has to be fully approved before the project can happen.
So you had something? Yeah.
I do. I have two things to say, so I'm going to go backwards. One, on your fee question, again, I haven't studied your fee structure, but I want to alert you that there is a bill that was passed by both houses this year. It has not yet been signed by the governor. If it gets signed by the governor, what it says is that if you are a smaller IDA encompassed by a larger, so if you were a city IDA within a county IDA, the city's fees, their administrative fees can be no more. They have to match exactly what the larger IDA is. So for instance, you're a county IDA. So if you have smaller IDAs, smaller local IDAs, towns, cities, or villages that compete with you in theory for work, if this bill gets signed, their fee will have to match your fee. Now, I don't know that it's going to be signed. We're tracking it, but it has not yet been signed. So just a heads up, a little flag in the back of your heads. With respect to the process for approving a project, I almost agree with everything Bill said, except that you cannot approve a project until you complete the seeker review, which is an environmental review that you must do. So you have to first hold your public hearing. You have to then, however long it takes you to do seeker, and a lot of times you can do them within 30 days, between the time you hold your public hearing and the time you have your next meeting. But you have to make a seeker determination before you can approve any benefits going to a project. So depending on the size of the project, that could be a 30-day period, or it could be a 60, 90, depending on the project and how involved seeker is, really drives how quickly a project can get approved. But otherwise, I totally agree with Bill.
And so who reviews that? Who's responsible for the review of that, the
seeker review?
Well, so again, getting back to what you were saying, Mike, about who's responsible for what. So in my experience, whoever you use to do your lease transactional work is going to handle your seeker reviews. If the project is large enough, council will say to you, we want to engage an engineering firm to help us because this is an enormous project and that's what needs to happen. And all of those costs are passed on to your developer. But if it is not a large type 1 project, then your council can assist you in undertaking that seeker review, that environmental review. So again, it's who do you want to do that? You have to figure out who's going to be doing what services for you, but it is normally handled by your council. And then if needed, depending on the size of the project, an engineering firm.
Now, to go along with that, Sue, if they are already doing something like that in front of a planning board and going through their seeker review at the planning board level, can we, for lack of a better term, copy that or use that information for our seeker determination? Because it's two separate seeker determinations, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
It depends on what is presented to the planning board when you say two different ones. So in other words, can I flip it around on you? Say somebody comes to you, a project comes to you, and you have to do seeker. You have to decide who are the involved agencies. Has a seeker review been done before or not? Who are the involved agencies? If it's a type 1 action. If it's a type 1 action, you have to notify those other involved agencies. They can choose to let you act as lead agent, or they can say, no, we're going to do our own, or we object to you doing it. If it is not a type 1 action, then you're absolutely right. The planning board has to do it. Everybody who issues anything has, governmentally has to do seeker. So if it's not a type 1, then the planning commission's going to do their own, you're going to do your own, et cetera, et cetera. If it is a type 1 that the municipality has undertaken and provided you notice because it's a type 1, then you would just abide by their finding or adopt their finding.
Sure. So like is that another, we have that policies in place for what that would be for type 1, et cetera, to.
It's all governed by state law.
It's not a policy that you undertake. It's the law. I mean, it's the State Environmental Quality Review Act. So it dictates what you do. You don't need a policy. You are obligated to follow it.
I hate to put you on the spot, but I believe you said that you have that experience and you yourself and your law firm to assist us with that, correct?
Correct.
That's what I thought during the interview. So, yeah. So, okay. Thank you for the clarification. And
Sure.
Obviously, the first one, this new board will learn as we go, but we'll look for guidance all along the way from everybody and make sure that we do it correctly. The idea is when we do the public hearing, we like to do the public hearing in the location, at least the municipality where the project is looking to go. So it makes it easier for people to come out and opine upon that.
And Mr. Chairman, in fact, you're obligated to do that. You have to hold the public hearing in the locality where the project is.
Oh, cool. All right. I didn't know.
So you're doing a fine job.
It was practice. I didn't know it was just.
It's like you're on the ball already. You got it. Yeah.
That's our policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are some of the future things I'm thinking about for those things. So
I would have had Russ Genzel on for at least this history lesson about what they've been doing, but I told him, not knowing this would come up, but I told him he didn't need it here, so I will get a little history from him, even though what's more important is what we do going forward.
yeah, and then obviously parish reporting. What does it do, and for 2021 in its entirety, and who's going to help us with doing that? What type of help you need? What type of consultants? What type of counsel? All that good stuff.
We've been talking about that. I didn't believe it's March 31st it's due, I believe.
Yeah, so that's all something that we should wait for. Counsel, any questions? Yes.
So I don't know how you have felt about this in the past, but IDAs who undertake projects, those project developers are not obligated to pay prevailing wage. That is the current state of affairs. They have never been considered public works projects, and they are not obligated to pay prevailing wage. There is currently, to become effective January 1, any project that an IDA, not just an IDA, but for our purposes, an IDA undertakes where the total project costs are in excess of $5 million, there is a formula you have to go through to determine whether or not the project will trip the prevailing wage requirement. So I don't know if you are at all familiar with the legislation, if you've heard of it, if it's concerning to you. It is concerning to almost every IDA because the implementation of the provisions in that legislation are not clear. There are terms that have yet to be literally and legally have yet to be defined in terms of what constitutes construction costs. So doing the math is impossible, literally impossible. And it is the developers who have to certify to the Department of Labor whether or not they trip the threshold. So there was an IDA Academy a couple of weeks ago. This was a panel discussion. I sat on it, and IDAs are very concerned about what their next year is going to look like because there is so much uncertainty surrounding this piece of legislation and its impact as of January 1st. And the concern is that developers won't come because the risk is too great, that the Department of Labor could come in and put a stop work order on your project simply because your neighbor who hates you because you have a dog that barks in the middle of the night filed a complaint. I mean, all you have to do is call the Department of Labor and say, hey, I think they're supposed to be paying prevailing wage. And the Department of Labor can, I'm sorry, say it again.
Did the governor sign that into law yet?
It was previously, it was signed into law as part of last year's budget, but it was slated to become effective January 1st. And there's a big push going on right now to get them to push it. But there is this huge state of flux right now about what this is going to mean. And so the developer world is worried about it. IDAs are worried about it because the feeling is developers, the risk is so great to developers, and it's going to be, we think, virtually impossible to get lenders to agree to finance, not knowing whether you have to pay or you don't have to pay. So unless developers are so far below the threshold of 5 million, or they just say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to pay prevailing wage because I can't take the risk. So I'm just going to build it into my pro forma. I don't know how it is in your area, but in upstate New York, that is going to be a death knell for development because the increased costs are huge.
A question, when this came up as part of a legislative update that was given to us back a while ago, they also talked about prevailing wage for any type of delivery, like delivery of products. Is that also in the same legislation where if like somebody was a delivery person that was delivering material, that would have to also be certified?
That's a different, it's not part of this legislation. It's a entirely different piece of legislation. And to be honest with you, I'd have to look at that again because that's not something that immediately impacted the IDAs that I work with. So I can look at that if you want, but that's separate and apart from this labor law change that is due to become effective January 1.
So I was understanding that for prevailing wage to kick in, the project exceeded 5 million and had 30% of state or whatever funding, which included IDA benefits.
Correct.
So it's not just the IDA, if correct. So then the question always comes up, for us in construction, where was that could also include soft costs, it could include, which it could go one way or another. I don't know what's included.
Well, who's going to be the calculation police? We don't know what ESC gives.
It's not up to you to do, it's not the IDA's obligation to do the calculation, it's the developer's obligation. But the problem is that it's a $5 million project cost, not defined, not a defined term in the labor law. And then if 30% of the aggregate of all public benefits, so IDAs, if you got a grant from ESD, if you're getting certain tax credits, all of that.
So when you is that like if we did a 10 or a 15-year pilot, those accumulative years in the
Correct.
future would count towards it?
Yes,
Wow.
The savings. So if you said like over this 15, I'm just going to pick weird numbers, but let's say over 15 years, you would otherwise have paid $1 million. But under the pilot, you're going to save 500,000. The 500,000, you have to add that. You have to add it to the sales tax exemption amount you're getting. You have to add it to the mortgage reporting tax exemption. You have to add it to the ESD grant that you're getting. And when you add that all up, does that equal 30% of the construction costs? The problem is construction costs not defined. And the statute says it is to be defined by this panel that they're supposed to seat, has not been seated. And it provides that developers can go and seek guidance from this panel, but there's no panel to go to. So that's why it is just put everybody in a tailspin in terms of what's going to happen next year. And so you see, unfortunately, I know it's not for you guys, but you see other IDAs, banging their heads against the wall, getting deals closed this month. because people are so concerned that as of January 1, if nothing changes, and they don't close beforehand, they'll have to pay prevailing wage. So stay
And then-
tuned, more to come, but
Yeah, that was my next question, is that a final resolution would have to be before December 31st, 2021 to avoid that.
you have to close. So I'm going to say this, not knowing how you guys use your terms, but if you had a project pending before the IDA and you passed all your resolutions saying, yep, we'll close, we'll give you all these benefits, you need to close on your lease documents, sign them, file your pilots, whatever, by December 31st to ensure 100% that you're not going to have to pay prevailing wage. Because unless they push the effective date, even though no one on the face of the earth knows how to interpret the legislation, it becomes effective January 1.
Okay. And then that raises a question about our labor policy and our labor consultant. They would just be tasked with making sure that they meet our labor policy, not the state's, correct?
Correct.
So if our labor policy says 85% local labor from the Hudson Valley, they would just be tasked with that, not having to deal with, you know, we wouldn't be paying for something that the state would be mandating upon us.
No, but, so I don't mean to hijack the meeting with this issue, but the legislation also says that if you meet the threshold that requires you to pay prevailing wage, you also have to comply with certain MWBE and disabled veterans, you know, how the state has requirements for meeting those thresholds. If you trip the prevailing wage, you also are obligated to comply with those. So for IDAs who have local labor policies, which most IDAs do, if someone comes to you and they say, look, I have to, in order to comply with state law, I have to hire X number of MWBEs and there are none in your labor area. I need to get a waiver of that because otherwise I can't comply with state law. So IDAs are going to be looking at their local labor policies or local access policies to build in an exception in the event that a developer comes to you and says, I can't comply with state law unless I get a waiver of this.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now, with discussion, but yeah, okay. Do you think we have applications now? We're not going to. That's a tough issue.
Sure.
That's something that elected officials pass.
And Sue, last question, in your opinion, as you said, there's a lot to be sorted out by this panel, whatever it might be. If there's no further guidance from them before January 1st, and they don't punt it, you know, before then, in your opinion, do you think it becomes, it's in effect January 1st if there's no further guidance, regardless of what details are not yet sorted out?
I think by operation of law, it becomes effective. I also think that, and I can't remember what this is called from law school, but I believe there's some theory of impossibility. Like it is legally impossible to comply with this legislation because the one defined term, construction costs, is not defined. And the statute says this body has to define it, but they haven't constituted this body. So developers cannot figure out how to do the math if they don't know what the defined term is. So do I think it becomes effective? Absolutely. Do I think it's legally impossible to comply with? Absolutely. Where do I think that leaves us? I think that leaves us with developers whose counsel is going to say to them, you've got to be crazy to go and get benefits without knowing if you're going to trip the prevailing wage. Because while I, as your counsel, might say to you, there's no way a court's going to enforce this against you, so you should feel free to go get whatever benefits you want. As your counsel, I'm going to say, nobody wants to be that first case. You be the second guy. Let your friend go ahead of you. Let them try to do it and let them pay the legal costs to get it fixed. Don't you do it, because the risk is just too great to develop. And I don't know a lender who's going to be like, hey, I'll give you $5 million. Go ahead. I'm willing to take that risk. I just think it's
Yeah.
gonna have a chilling effect across the state.
Okay. Well, so if you get any more updates on that, can you please just share whatever you learned with us?
Absolutely. Yep.
Right. And if there's any other education things that staff and or board members should go, let's have that discussion for first quarter as well.
You got it.
Good. All right.
Going on 2 hours. Just throwing that out there.
Not covered. All right. Anything else? All right. Let's to adjourn. Everyone say aye. Aye.